She walked slowly through the wide doors of the hall, her small hands clutching the old scratched instrument case as if it were the most precious thing in the world. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows fell across the polished floor, making the space look both grand and intimidating. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her chest. The voices of people inside the room reached her ears even before she stepped fully into the hall. They were whispers at first, quick, almost invisible murmurs, but they carried a weight she could feel pressing on her shoulders. Some voices carried laughter, some were skeptical, and a few seemed downright cruel. She could hear them before even looking, and she knew they were talking about her, about the young girl with the worn-out instrument case. Her shoes made quiet taps on the polished floor as she stepped inside. She could feel the eyes on her immediately. Some were curious, some were impatient, and others were filled with doubt. She kept her head high, letting the sunlight hit her face, trying to gather the courage she needed. Her heart was beating fast, but she had come this far, and there was no turning back. Every step she took felt heavier because she knew how much was at stake. They were waiting to see if she would fail, waiting to see if she was worthy of being in that space. But she reminded herself that she belonged here, not because of anyone else's approval, but because of her own determination and love for music. As she moved toward the center of the room, some people couldn't hide their smirks. A few even whispered something to each other that made her ears burn. But she focused on the case in her hands, thinking about the hours she had spent practicing, the sacrifices she had made, and the dreams she had held on to tightly for so long. She knelt down carefully and set the instrument on the floor, brushing her fingers over its surface with a gentle familiarity that only someone who truly loved it could understand. She opened the case slowly, making sure every movement was precise. The room was filled with whispers again, and this time some people laughed quietly. She didn't flinch. She had learned a long time ago that the laughter of others could not define her talent or her worth. She took a seat, adjusting herself on the small chair that felt much bigger than it should. She could feel the weight of the eyes on her, judging, questioning, doubting. She closed her eyes for a moment, just for a few seconds, and imagined the music flowing from her fingers. Imagined the notes filling the room with something pure and true. It was her way of finding calm amidst the storm of doubt around her. When she opened her eyes, she could see some people rolling theirs, shifting in their seats, perhaps already convinced she wouldn't be able to play well. That only made her focus more. She could feel a fire igniting inside her, a quiet determination that wouldn't be dimmed by sneers or whispers. Her hands hovered over the instrument for a moment, the familiar shapes and keys calling to her as if welcoming an old friend. She remembered the early mornings she had spent practicing before school, the evenings when everyone else was resting, and she was lost in music. She remembered the sacrifices she had made, the times she had felt exhausted but still refused to quit. All of that led to this moment. The laughter and doubts of the people around her felt small compared to the hours she had spent building her own confidence and skill. She pressed a key lightly, almost shyly, and a soft note filled the air. The room seemed to hold its breath. The first note was gentle, fragile, but it carried a sense of honesty that couldn't be denied. A few heads turned, a few people leaned forward, curiosity replacing some of the initial ridicule. She played another note, then another, each one more confident than the last. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't performing for their approval. She was playing because it was her voice, the way she could express what words could not. Slowly, the room's atmosphere began to shift, imperceptibly at first, but it was happening. The whispers began to fade, replaced by a quiet attentiveness that made her feel a small spark of encouragement. She continued to play, her hands moving in ways that had become second nature after countless hours of practice. She could feel the music in her bones, in her fingers, in every beat of her heart. She could see some of the faces that had mocked her earlier soften, their expressions changing as the notes reached them. Music was powerful, she realized, stronger than doubt, stronger than ridicule. The notes she played spoke louder than any words they could throw at her. She was telling a story through her music, and slowly, the audience was beginning to listen. A few people exchanged glances, and she noticed that some were even leaning forward, trying to catch every sound. Her confidence began to grow with every note. She had spent so many moments imagining this very scene, fearing it might never come, and now it was happening. Her fingers moved faster, more assuredly, and the room felt alive with the music she was creating. She could feel the tension that had been there from the start begin to dissolve, replaced by something that felt almost like wonder. She was no longer playing for approval, but the approval was slowly coming on its own, born from the honesty and passion in her performance. Time seemed to blur as she played, the world outside the music ceasing to exist. She could hear the faintest intake of breath from someone near the back of the room. That small sound made her heart flutter, not with fear but with excitement. She realized she had captured their attention, that her music had reached them in a way that words never could. The laughter that had greeted her entrance seemed like a distant memory now, almost as if it had never existed. Her focus never wavered. She was completely immersed in the moment, letting the music guide her and speak for her. Every note she played told a piece of her story. It spoke of the struggles she had faced, of the quiet moments of practice that no one saw, of the determination that had carried her this far. She imagined each listener connecting with her music in their own way, feeling the emotion behind every movement. She didn't need to explain anything. The music itself was explanation enough. The room, once full of doubt and ridicule, had started to open up to her, letting her in through the only language she knew perfectly, the language of music. For the first time since she had entered, she allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't because she wanted them to like her, but because she knew she was doing exactly what she had set out to do. She had faced the jeers, the doubts, and the sneers, and yet here she was, playing from her heart without hesitation. She realized that her strength didn't come from the applause or the approval of others. It came from believing in herself, from trusting the hours of effort she had put in, and from the love she had for her craft. The music she created was proof of that belief. The final note of her short introductory piece lingered in the air, soft and fading, and for a moment, there was silence. The room seemed to exhale together, as if even the walls had been holding their breath. She opened her eyes fully, looking around at the people who had doubted her. Their expressions had changed subtly. Some were surprised, some impressed, and a few had eyes that seemed to shine with admiration. She knew this was just the beginning, but it was a beginning she had earned. The doubts had not disappeared completely, but they had been softened by the truth of what she could do. She had shown even in those first few notes that she was here to be heard, and that her talent could not be dismissed. She took another deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief and determination. The journey ahead was still long, and the challenges were far from over, but for this moment she had claimed a small victory. The music had become her shield and her voice. The jeers, the whispers, and the laughter had not defeated her. Instead, they had fueled her resolve. She could face them again because she now knew the power of her own courage and the strength that came from pouring her heart into something she loved. That small hall, filled with eyes that doubted her, had become the stage on which she proved to herself that nothing could stop her when she believed in her own abilities. The second part of her journey began as she felt the warmth of the music flow through her fingers. The first few notes she had played were like tiny sparks, but now she could feel a steady flame igniting inside her. Each sound she created seemed to connect with the listeners in a way words never could. She realized that music was more than just notes on an instrument. It was a bridge between her heart and the hearts of everyone in the room. The audience, which had greeted her entrance with doubt and laughter, was now leaning in, drawn by something they had not expected. She looked around briefly, noticing the subtle changes in their expressions. Some of the people who had whispered or smirked were now silent, their eyebrows raised in curiosity or surprise. One person sitting near the front had their hands resting on their knees, eyes fixed on her as if trying to catch every detail. Another leaned slightly forward, their mouth slightly open in awe. She didn't let their gaze intimidate her. Instead, it gave her a strange sense of encouragement. The room was slowly transforming, and she could feel it. The music was no longer just her own. It belonged to everyone who was listening, even if they didn't realize it yet. She began to play a melody that had been in her mind for weeks, one that told a story of hope and perseverance. Her fingers moved with growing confidence, pressing the keys firmly but gently, allowing the sound to rise and fall naturally. Each note carried emotion, subtle but powerful, and she could sense the audience being drawn deeper into the music. It was like a conversation without words, an invisible thread connecting her to every person present. Some eyes glistened, a few faces softened, and even those who had doubted her earlier seemed to hesitate before dismissing her again. She felt a quiet satisfaction. She wasn't just performing, she was communicating in the purest way she knew. The hall was no longer a space of judgment, it was a space of listening. The air seemed heavier, thick with attention and focus, as if the room itself had leaned closer to hear her. She could hear the faintest sounds of people breathing in unison, almost like the rhythm of the music had entered their bodies. She paused for a brief moment, letting the notes linger in the air, and could see a shift happening. Whispers had vanished. Laughter was gone. Only the music remained, and with it, a sense of respect that had been absent when she first entered. The transformation amazed her. It was one thing to believe in herself, but to witness others changing their minds in real time was something entirely different. Her melody deepened, growing richer and more expressive with each passing second. She poured every bit of her energy and emotion into the performance, not holding anything back. She remembered the nights spent practicing, the times she had been frustrated and wanted to give up but didn't. She remembered the encouragement of a few who had always believed in her, even when she doubted herself. Every note was a tribute to that journey, a story that couldn't be told with words alone. She felt the music shaping itself, guiding her hands and filling the space around her. The audience was no longer a collection of strangers. They were participants, even if silently, in the world she was creating. Somewhere in the middle of the piece, she hit a sequence of notes that required both speed and precision. Her fingers flew across the instrument, dancing with skill and grace, yet never losing the emotional depth of the melody. She felt a thrill as she played, not from showing off, but from the sheer joy of making something beautiful. The audience's reactions were subtle but noticeable. Eyes widened slightly, heads tilted, and a few people unconsciously moved closer to hear better. She had captured their attention fully now. The room that had once jeered at her had been replaced by a collective anticipation, a silent acknowledgement that something remarkable was unfolding. She continued to weave her story through the music, the highs and lows of the melody reflecting the struggles and triumphs of her own journey. She imagined each listener connecting with the emotions behind the notes in their own personal way. Perhaps someone remembered a moment of loss, perhaps another felt the warmth of hope, and perhaps a few simply marveled at the skill and courage it took to play so fearlessly. The thought that her music could touch people she didn't even know filled her with humility and pride at the same time. She was no longer just performing for herself. She was sharing a part of her soul, and that realization gave her strength. There were moments when she felt a tremor in her fingers, a tiny hesitation born from nerves, but she never let it stop her. She took a steadying breath and continued, letting the music guide her, letting it speak louder than fear ever could. Each note was a reassurance to herself, a statement that she had earned this moment and was worthy of it. As the melody flowed, she could see that even the most skeptical listeners were responding. Some nodded slightly, others held their breath in awe, and a few had eyes that glistened with unspoken emotion. It was a transformation that came slowly but surely, a shift from doubt to connection, from ridicule to engagement. Her music reached a section that was slower, more reflective, almost tender. She allowed herself to sink into it, feeling every vibration and letting the emotions guide her hands. The room seemed to lean in, listening with rapt attention, absorbing every nuance. She could sense that she had moved beyond mere performance. This was now an exchange, an interaction that didn't require words. She could feel the energy of the room, the subtle changes in posture and expression, and it gave her a deep sense of fulfillment. The music was no longer hers alone. It was theirs, shared in a moment that existed only here and now. As she approached the final part of the piece, the melody began to build, growing stronger and more confident. Her fingers moved with purpose, each note deliberate and full of life. The hall seemed to vibrate with the sound, carrying it to every corner, filling the space with energy and emotion. The audience sat in silence, captivated, as if afraid to interrupt the flow of what was unfolding. She could feel their admiration building, though it hadn't yet been expressed. She knew that she was reaching them, that the initial skepticism and laughter were being replaced with appreciation and awe. The final notes were soft and lingering, a delicate echo that seemed to settle over the room. She let them fade naturally, letting the silence speak as loudly as the music itself. The audience didn't move immediately. The spell of the performance held them, and she allowed herself a small smile, knowing that she had accomplished something remarkable. She had taken a room full of doubters and skeptics and had given them a glimpse of her world, a world shaped by dedication, courage, and heart. When the first claps finally broke the silence, they were tentative, almost surprised, but growing steadily as more and more people joined in. She could feel a rush of relief and quiet joy, not because she sought applause, but because she had proven to herself that she could rise above doubt and fear. The music had spoken, and it had been heard. She remained seated for a moment, savoring the energy in the room, knowing that the journey was far from over, but confident that she had taken the first big step. The applause continued, and she looked around at the faces, some still showing surprise, others smiling genuinely. She felt a mixture of pride, gratitude, and anticipation. This performance had shown her that courage, dedication, and honesty could transform a situation, even one filled with doubt. The audience had shifted from jeering to attentive, from skeptical to engaged, and that realization gave her a sense of empowerment she had never known before. It was a lesson she would carry with her, not just in music but in life. That belief in oneself could turn the harshest judgment into recognition, and that the heart, when sincere, could reach even the hardest of minds. She carefully closed the instrument case, her hands steady now, and stood up, feeling a quiet satisfaction that radiated from within. The hall had become more than a stage. It had become a space where she had proven, above all else, the power of persistence, courage, and honest expression. As she walked out, she could still hear whispers, but now they were different, curious, admiring, and respectful. She knew that this moment would stay with her forever, a reminder of what could be achieved when one followed their passion, remained true to oneself, and refused to let the doubts of others define their journey. As she returned to her seat for the next piece, a quiet sense of determination settled over her. The first performance had shown her that people could be moved, that their judgment could shift when confronted with sincerity and talent. Yet she knew this moment was different. It required more than just technical skill. She needed to pour herself fully into the music, to let it carry every emotion she had stored, every struggle, every victory, every quiet moment of doubt and hope she had lived through. She took a deep breath and let her fingers hover over the instrument, feeling its familiar weight and comfort. The audience was silent now, watching her closely. The skepticism had not completely vanished, but there was curiosity, and that curiosity was fragile. She began with a simple note, letting it resonate through the room. It was soft at first, a gentle invitation rather than a statement. The note lingered, stretching just enough to catch attention, and she felt the room respond. Someone shifted slightly, another person leaned forward, and she sensed the shift in energy. It was subtle, but it was there. They were listening in a way they had not before, opening themselves, even if unconsciously, to what she had to offer. As she continued, the melody grew, winding and twisting through different emotions. She played with care, letting the notes speak naturally without forcing them. She remembered the times she had practiced alone in her room, the hours spent repeating the same passage, correcting every small mistake. Those moments of solitude had built the strength she now relied on, the quiet confidence that allowed her to face a room full of doubters. Every note was shaped by that experience, and she could feel it resonating in the hall. The music began to tell a story without words but full of meaning. She played notes that spoke of fear and hesitation, and others that soared with hope and determination. She could see that the audience was responding, some faces softening, some eyes widening. There was a sense of shared experience forming, a connection born not of conversation but of emotion. She had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing compared to the reality of feeling the room shift as her music moved through it. It was exhilarating, humbling, and deeply satisfying all at once. Midway through the performance, she reached a passage that demanded both technical skill and emotional depth. Her fingers flew across the keys, precise yet expressive, each note carrying meaning. The melody swelled, filling the hall with a richness that drew listeners in. She could sense the change around her. The people who had once whispered and laughed were now silent, their attention fully captured. She felt a thrill, not from the power she held over them, but from the realization that her honesty, her dedication, and her love for the music were enough to command attention and respect. The music took on a rhythm that mirrored her heartbeat, steady and strong. She let herself feel every emotion she had ever felt while practicing, while doubting, while striving for something greater than herself. She thought of all the times she had been told she couldn't, that she wasn't good enough, that her efforts were wasted. She poured that energy into the melody, transforming past frustration and fear into beauty and grace. She could see subtle signs of recognition in the audience, a slight nod, a relaxed posture, a glimmer of understanding in someone's eyes. The walls of doubt were crumbling, and she could feel the shift. The passage grew more complex, yet she moved with ease, guided by experience and intuition. She let her fingers move naturally, following the flow of the music, letting it lead her rather than forcing it. The notes danced and intertwined, carrying her emotions to every corner of the hall. She noticed a few people holding their breath as if afraid to break the spell of the performance. She felt a sense of awe herself, recognizing the beauty in what she was creating and sharing. It was no longer just a performance. It was a dialogue, a connection between her and every person present. As she approached the climactic section, the melody soared, filled with strength and courage. She played with intensity, yet the emotion remained clear, never lost to speed or complexity. The audience was captivated, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes, allowing the music to wash over them. She realized that her music had moved beyond mere notes. It had become a living expression of her journey, her struggles, her perseverance. The skepticism that had greeted her at the door had given way to fascination and admiration. She had crossed a threshold, transforming doubt into engagement, fear into understanding. She allowed herself a brief moment of vulnerability, a passage slower and more tender, as if speaking directly to the hearts of those listening. The silence in the room was profound, the kind that exists only when people are fully present, fully immersed. She could see subtle signs of emotion, a tear glistening on a cheek, a soft inhale, a hand pressed lightly to the chest. She felt an overwhelming sense of connection, a bond forged not by words or gestures but by the shared experience of emotion transmitted through music. This was more than she had hoped for, yet it was exactly what she had imagined in her quiet moments of practice. The music shifted again, building in strength and confidence, reflecting a triumphant rise above struggle and doubt. Her hands moved with purpose, confident and expressive, every note deliberate, every pause intentional. The hall seemed to respond, vibrating with the energy she created. The audience, once doubtful, was now fully present, caught in the story she was telling without words. She realized that this was the essence of her performance, to turn vulnerability into power, doubt into understanding, fear into admiration. She had become a storyteller, using her instrument as her voice, and the listeners were fully engaged. As the final notes approached, she slowed slightly, letting each sound resonate fully, allowing the silence between notes to carry as much weight as the notes themselves. The melody softened, delicate and emotional, leaving space for the listeners to absorb the journey she had shared. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction and peace, knowing that she had given her all, that she had expressed everything she intended. She could see the impact of her performance on the audience. Faces softened, eyes shone with emotion, and bodies leaned slightly forward, fully present. She had touched them, reached them, and in doing so, had proven to herself the power of dedication, courage, and honesty. The final note lingered, a soft echo that hung in the air for a moment longer than expected. The room remained silent, as if holding its collective breath, waiting for what would come next. She closed her eyes briefly, savoring the moment, and felt a quiet triumph. She had crossed a threshold, transformed a room full of doubt into a space of admiration, not through arrogance or force, but through sincerity, skill, and heart. The power of music had done what words could not. It had created understanding, moved hearts, and inspired respect. When the applause finally came, it started quietly, hesitant at first, then grew steadily, filling the hall with sound and energy. She remained seated, letting the waves of appreciation wash over her, acknowledging the transformation that had taken place. The people who had once doubted her had become witnesses to something remarkable. She smiled quietly, not out of vanity but from the quiet knowledge that she had faced fear, defied expectation, and allowed her talent and heart to shine. This moment would stay with her forever, a reminder of what was possible when one believed in oneself and let their passion guide them. She felt a quiet excitement as she prepared for the next part of her performance, knowing that this was the moment where everything would come together. The first three pieces had warmed the audience, shifted their focus, and opened a door of possibility. Now it was time to pour every bit of emotion, every ounce of courage, and every fragment of experience into the music, letting it speak louder than words ever could. She sat in her chair, adjusting the instrument carefully, feeling the familiar texture under her fingers. Her heart raced, not with fear but with anticipation. She had practiced this piece countless times, yet it never felt the same as it did in this moment. surrounded by people who had once doubted her. The audience was silent, waiting, their energy almost tangible in the air. She started with a soft note, letting it float gently across the room. The sound hung in the air, delicate but commanding attention. She could sense the audience leaning in, their eyes fixed on her hands, on the instrument, on the story she was about to tell. The music began to flow, tender and slow at first, building with emotion as her fingers danced across the keys. Each note carried meaning, reflecting the struggles she had faced, the quiet moments of practice, the times she had doubted herself, and the times she had chosen to keep going despite it all. As the melody grew, so did the intensity of her emotions. She allowed herself to sink into the music, feeling every vibration, letting it guide her. She played with a depth that surprised even her, letting the sorrow, hope, and determination she carried in her heart flow freely. She thought of all the people who had doubted her, who had laughed or whispered behind her back. She did not play for revenge or approval, but the realization that her perseverance had brought her here filled her with quiet strength. The music was her voice, louder than any word could ever be. The audience's reactions were subtle but noticeable. Heads tilted slightly, eyes widened in surprise, and a few people unconsciously leaned forward, drawn by the raw emotion that filled the room. The hall, once a place of judgment and doubt, was now a sanctuary of attention and connection. She felt the power of the moment, a rare and precious feeling that only comes when art reaches its intended heart. The music was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone present, shared silently, intimately, without a single word exchanged. She moved into the middle section of the piece, a complex arrangement that demanded both technical skill and emotional depth. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, each note resonating clearly, each pause intentional. She allowed herself to feel deeply, letting the music guide her, letting the melody convey her story. She thought of the countless hours she had spent perfecting her craft, the sacrifices, the early mornings, the late nights, and the times she had pushed through exhaustion and frustration. All of it led to this moment, and she poured it into every movement, every sound, every note. The audience was captivated. She could feel their focus, their energy, their emotional presence. She noticed small gestures, a person clasping their hands tightly, another pressing a hand gently to their chest, a few leaning forward as if they wanted to absorb every note. She felt a connection she had never experienced before, a bond created through music, one that transcended words and barriers. She realized that the skepticism that had greeted her earlier was completely gone, replaced by curiosity, admiration, and perhaps even a touch of wonder. The music began to build, crescendoing with intensity, emotion pouring out in a powerful stream. She allowed herself to be carried by it, letting the melody take her wherever it needed to go. The sound filled the room, reverberating off the walls, touching every corner, and wrapping around every listener. She could feel their hearts responding, their breathing adjusting to the rhythm of her music. She was no longer just a performer. She had become a storyteller, a conduit for emotion, sharing her soul through every note. The audience was fully present, caught in the spell of the music, unable to turn away even if they wanted to. She transitioned into a softer, more delicate passage, letting the music breathe, letting it speak of quiet moments, of reflection, of vulnerability. The silence between notes was just as important as the notes themselves. She noticed a few tears glistening on cheeks, a hand pressed gently to a chest, a subtle nod of understanding. The emotional power of the piece was undeniable, and she felt a deep, quiet satisfaction knowing that she had reached them, that her honesty and courage had touched hearts. This was the moment she had dreamed of, the moment where all her effort, all her belief in herself, and all her love for music came together in perfect harmony. The melody began to rise again, gaining strength, momentum, and confidence. Her fingers moved faster, yet the emotion never wavered. Every note was deliberate, every movement expressive, every sound carrying meaning. The audience was fully immersed, their attention unwavering. She could sense their admiration growing, their initial doubt completely transformed into respect and awe. She had taken a room full of skeptics and turned it into a space of engagement, connection, and shared emotion. It was a powerful and humbling experience, one that she would carry with her forever. She reached the climax of the piece, a section that demanded all her skill, all her focus, and all her heart. She allowed herself to feel the music fully, to let it guide her hands, to let it express everything she had ever felt, everything she had ever wanted to say. The sound filled the room with intensity, emotion, and beauty. She could see the audience, leaning forward, their faces fully engaged, their eyes reflecting the depth of the experience. She realized that she had captured them completely, that the room had become a shared space of emotion, understanding, and admiration. The final notes approached, delicate and poignant, carrying a sense of closure and resolution. She slowed her fingers, letting each note resonate fully, allowing the silence between notes to speak as loudly as the music itself. The room remained silent, absorbed in the moment, savoring the beauty, the emotion, and the power of what they were experiencing. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had given her all, shared her heart, and created something truly meaningful. The applause had not yet come, but she knew it would, and that knowledge allowed her to fully appreciate the moment, the connection, and the impact of her performance. When the applause finally erupted, it was powerful and heartfelt, filling the hall with sound and energy. She remained seated, letting the waves of appreciation wash over her, acknowledging the transformation that had taken place. The people who had once doubted her had witnessed something extraordinary. She felt pride, gratitude, and a quiet sense of triumph. She had faced fear, overcome doubt, and shared her heart through music. This experience was more than a performance. It was a testament to perseverance, courage, and the power of passion. It was a moment that would stay with her forever, a reminder of the strength that comes from believing in oneself and sharing that belief with the world. As she carefully closed the instrument case and stood up, she took in the sight of the audience, many still seated in awe, some with tears in their eyes, others clapping with genuine admiration. She knew that this was the culmination of a journey, not just for her, but for everyone who had been present, who had witnessed the transformation from doubt to respect, from skepticism to connection. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had touched lives, inspired hearts, and shown the power of courage, dedication, and honesty. The hall had become a place of shared emotion, a space where music had bridged the gap between fear and understanding, doubt and admiration. She smiled quietly, letting the moment settle in, knowing that this was a memory she would carry forever, a testament to the power of perseverance and the beauty of heartfelt expression. She took a steadying breath as she prepared for the final piece, knowing that this was the moment everything would culminate. The first 4 performances had transformed the room. Doubt had given way to curiosity, curiosity to attention, and attention to genuine engagement. Now it was time for her to play not just with skill, but with her heart completely open. She sat in her chair, feeling the familiar weight of the instrument under her fingers. Her heartbeat was steady but filled with anticipation, and she felt a quiet excitement ripple through her body. This was the final opportunity to convey everything she had experienced, everything she had learned, and everything she had endured. The audience was silent, their focus unbroken, their energy directed entirely toward her. She pressed the first key gently, letting the note resonate softly through the hall. It was a delicate beginning, almost like a whisper, drawing the listeners in. She could feel the room leaning closer, the collective attention pressing toward her like a warm current. She let the music flow naturally, each note carrying intention and feeling. The melody rose gradually, gaining strength as she became more confident with every movement. She was not just playing notes, she was telling a story, and every listener was drawn into that narrative. She remembered the early mornings and late nights of practice, the moments of frustration, the times she had been told she wasn't ready, and the times she had chosen to persevere despite doubt. All of it had led to this moment, and she poured those experiences into the music. Every note was a reflection of her journey, her struggles, her triumphs, and her unwavering determination. She felt a connection with the audience, a silent understanding that transcended words. Even those who had once doubted her were now captivated, their expressions softened, their eyes wide, some glistening with emotion. The melody grew richer, more intricate, weaving through a tapestry of emotions. She let herself sink fully into the music, letting it guide her hands, letting it speak the words she could not. She felt joy, sorrow, hope, and courage in every movement, and she let those feelings pour out freely. The audience was completely absorbed, leaning in, eyes fixed, ears attuned to every subtle shift in tone and rhythm. She realized that the room was no longer a space of judgment but a shared space of experience, where the emotions she conveyed were mirrored in the hearts of the listeners. Midway through the piece, she entered a section that required precision, agility, and emotional depth simultaneously. Her fingers danced across the instrument with confidence, each movement deliberate, each note resonating with clarity. She could feel the energy in the room shift, sensing the audience being pulled into the story she was telling. She noticed subtle gestures of engagement. A person leaning forward, another closing their eyes, a few holding their breath as if afraid to miss a single sound. It was a delicate, intimate connection, one that had grown from the seeds of courage she had planted when she first took her seat in the hall. She allowed herself to feel vulnerability in the music, letting moments of softness and reflection emerge naturally. The audience responded, their emotions visible in subtle ways, a tear forming, a hand pressed gently to the chest, a slight nod of understanding. The power of this connection amazed her. She had faced skepticism, ridicule, and doubt, and now she was creating an experience that resonated deeply with everyone present. Her music had become a bridge, connecting hearts in a shared understanding of emotion, struggle, and perseverance. As the piece progressed, the melody soared, growing in intensity and strength. She played with purpose, letting the music rise and fall naturally, carrying her feelings with it. She felt an exhilarating sense of freedom, knowing that she could express herself fully without restraint. The audience's attention was unwavering, their engagement complete. She realized that the room had transformed completely from the moment she first entered. What had begun as jeers and doubt had evolved into rapt attention, admiration, and deep emotional connection. The climax of the piece approached, a moment that demanded everything she had to give. She let herself feel every note, every pause, every subtle shift in tone. The music became a living entity, flowing through her fingers and into the hearts of the listeners. She could sense the awe in the room, the way people leaned forward, the way their faces reflected the intensity and beauty of the moment. This was the power of honest expression, the power of persistence, the power of sharing one's heart fully. The audience was no longer judging. They were witnessing, feeling, and being transformed alongside her. The final notes were delicate, yet powerful, a balance of strength and tenderness. She slowed her movements, allowing each sound to linger, letting the silence between notes carry as much meaning as the notes themselves. The room held its breath, suspended in the beauty of the moment. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had given everything she could, that she had shared her heart and soul completely. The audience was absorbed, fully present, their emotions aligned with the story she had conveyed through music. When the last note faded, there was a heartbeat of silence. The hall seemed to exhale collectively, a quiet acknowledgement of what had just been experienced. Then, the applause began. It started tentatively, a few hands clapping. Then more joined in until the room erupted in a powerful, sustained ovation. The sound filled the space, overwhelming in its intensity, yet filled with sincerity and admiration. She remained seated for a moment, absorbing the energy, feeling the waves of appreciation wash over her. She had done more than perform. She had moved hearts, inspired respect, and turned doubt into recognition. She stood slowly, carefully savoring the moment. The audience continued to clap, some rising to their feet, others cheering, all expressing admiration and awe. The people who had once jeered, who had doubted her, were now standing, clapping, and acknowledging her talent and courage. She smiled quietly, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and pride filling her heart. This was the culmination of years of dedication, of belief in herself, of perseverance through doubt and fear. She had transformed the room through honesty, skill, and heart. As the applause continued, she allowed herself to reflect on the journey. The first moments of ridicule, the whispers and laughter now seemed distant, almost unreal. What had begun as a challenge had become a triumph, a moment of shared understanding and connection. She had faced the harshest judgments, risen above them, and allowed her passion to speak louder than any doubt. The audience's standing ovation was not just a recognition of skill, but a testament to courage, perseverance, and the power of remaining true to oneself. She took a slow breath, letting the significance of the moment sink in. Every glance from the audience, every cheer, every smile was a reminder of what could be achieved through determination and heart. She realized that her journey was not just about performing music. It was about inspiring belief, both in herself and in others. She had shown that courage and persistence could transform doubt into admiration, that honest expression could touch hearts, and that passion, when fully embraced, could overcome any obstacle. The final moments of the standing ovation carried on, echoing through the hall. She allowed herself a quiet bow, acknowledging the audience's recognition and returning the respect they had shown her. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the opportunity, for the experience, and for the ability to share her story in such a powerful way. This night would remain with her forever, a memory of triumph, connection, and the undeniable power of belief and perseverance. As she carefully packed the instrument, she looked around at the audience one last time, noting the smiles, the standing gestures, and the applause that continued to fill the room. She knew that this was more than a performance. It was a transformation, both for her and for everyone who had witnessed it. She walked out of the hall slowly, each step carrying the weight of accomplishment and the lightness of fulfillment. The echoes of applause and admiration followed her, a reminder that courage, dedication, and heart could overcome even the harshest doubt. She had turned jeers into standing ovation, skepticism into respect, and fear into triumph. This moment would stay with her forever, a testament to the power of believing in oneself and allowing one's heart to shine through every challenge.